Hey there, my name is Alicia, and today I'm going to be recommending books for you to read for Latinx Hispanic Heritage Month. If you're unfamiliar, Latinx Hispanic Heritage Month takes place from September 15th through October 15th, and here are a couple of my recommendations for you. If this is your first time diving into literature by Latinx authors, or if you want to get a glimpse of the expansiveness and the breadth of Latinx literature that can be out there, I recommend picking up Wild Tongues Can't Be Tamed. This is a collection of 15 voices from the Latinx diaspora. What I loved about this particular anthology is that it shows and captures the way that our different identities are similar, but it is also an example of how the Latinx diaspora is not a monolith and how we have a breadth and range of experiences. In this collection, you can anticipate to hear more about the intersection of different identities, criticisms of Latinidad, as well as a range of voices from the Afro-Latinx diaspora. My next recommendation is For Brown Girls with Sharp Edges and Tender Hearts, A Love Letter to Women of Color by Prisca, Dorcas, Mojia, Rodriguez. This is a book in which the author aims to redistribute knowledge to our comunidad. In particular, she talks about the knowledge that she gained through her graduate studies. Now, every chapter is divided into a different topic. Some of the topics you can expect are volunteerism or the myth of meritocracy, or the male gaze. Each chapter includes things that the author learns through her graduate stories, as well as personal anecdotes and the ways in which each topic affects and shapes our Latinx communities. My next recommendation is Hola, Papi, How to Come Out in a Walmart Parking Lot and Other Life Lessons by John Paul Brammer. Now, this is a memoir that is told in a very interesting way. It's told as a set of column essays through which the author recounts growing up as a biracial queer man, as well as providing really solid advice. This had a really good mix of being heartfelt and tender, but also extremely funny and relevant and relatable. I would say I would recommend this one if you're falling in love for the first time, if you're going through a breakup, or if you're struggling with your self-identity. My next recommendation is You Sound Like a White Girl by Julissa Arce. This is the first book that I read that really made me feel seen in a book, even though it is a nonfiction. In this particular book, the author unpacks the costs of assimilating to American white culture, the impacts that has on our communities and our development, and she makes a compelling argument to not assimilate. This is going to be a great book for those of you who are interested to learn more about the intersection of xenophobia and white supremacy, and how those two specific things impact our Latinx community in particular, and the way in which some of our culture and history has been erased. For me, it particularly stood out because the author uses a mix of personal anecdotes as well as history to go ahead and talk about these topics. Now, if you're looking for something that is more short and sweet, I recommend Diary of a Romantica Volume 1 by Celia Martinez. I actually first found Celia on TikTok. She reads through her poems on there, and the way that she recites her poetry is so evocative and emotional. There's times that she talks about breakups or unrequited love, and I feel that. I feel like I'm going through a breakup. I feel that feeling of unrequited love, so I knew that I had to have her collection. I'm pretty sure this is self-published, and there is now a volume 2. So if you want to check out a piece of poetry that feels very relatable and is very emotional and really makes you feel things, this is one that I really recommend. Okay, so moving on to some fiction books, I have 2 short story collections that I want to recommend. The first one of them is I'll Give You a Reason by Annell Lopez. This is one of 2 short story collections that I've given 5 stars to this year. I completely fell in love with it. So this is a collection of short stories that primarily focus on the Ironbound community, which is a largely immigrant neighborhood in Newark, New Jersey. What I particularly loved about this set of short stories is that they're very evocative. The way that the author writes about her characters and the setting and the place just feels like you're there watching all of this unfold. Some of these stories take place in school, at the workplace, on vacation, and all of these have this feeling of universal human connection. Even though a lot of these stories are about immigrants in that community, they don't feel like immigrant stories. They feel like stories about humans who happen to be immigrants here in the United States. It's a lovely connection and they each end with such a gut punch. The next short story collection is called Craft Stories I Wrote for the Devil by Ananda Lima. This is marketed as a horror collection of short stories. I would actually say that it leans more towards literary horror, and it's one that slowly crept up on me because it has this slice of life feel while also being very meta. This is a story of a Brazilian immigrant woman living in the United States who is writing stories to the devil. She met the devil at a party when she was younger, and so these are really stories within stories. The stories meander, and the devil as a character himself pops in and out throughout the book in a very supporting and caring and loving way. The more that I think about this book, the more that it grows on me. It's very quiet and reflective, very character driven, and also, like I mentioned, very slice of life. So if you go into this expecting a horror book, that's not what you're gonna get. This next book is probably my favorite book that I've read so far this year, and it is Anita de Monte Laughs Last by Xochitl Gonzalez. This is a campus novel, and I did listen to it through audiobook, which is the way that I recommend reading it, just because the narrator does such an amazing job at capturing the vibrancy and essence of our characters. They're sassy and independent and argumentative, and they're just full of life, and I feel like the narrator does such a great job capturing that aspect. So in this book we follow Anita, who is a Cuban artist who is on the rise, and after her death her legacy is erased. In our other timeline we follow Raquel, who is a Puerto Rican Latina student who is attending an elite university for the first time. She is a first-gen Latina attending college, and what I particularly loved about this novel is the way that Gonzalez was able to capture that specific experience. We have Raquel, who is really talented and so sure of herself. However, she is navigating this landscape for the first time and trying to carve her space while also making herself smaller to be palatable to the white gaze. You also see Raquel as she is struggling with belonging while being at this elite university, yet equally missing her parent and her culture. But what I think I love the most was the way in which this author depicted that we can make our own way while continuing to uplift the rest of our community and other Latinas. I really enjoyed it. I really hope that you pick this up. My next recommendation is Hola by Melissa Mogollon. This is a coming of age debut novel featuring a lesbian Colombian teen who is trying to navigate the complexities of family drama, sisterhood, and identity. Hola is also told in this very interesting way. I wasn't sure how it was going to work out, but once I read it, it just clicked. So this is told through one-sided phone conversations that our main character, Louisiana, has with her sister Mari over the phone. I know, you're like, how does that work? But it does, it just works. Even though we only really get to see the story through Louisiana's eyes, these characters are equally vibrant and sassy and full of life, and it's one of my favorite things about this particular book. My next recommendation is a blend of the last two books that I just talked about. This is Like Happiness by Ursula Villareal-Moura, and this can be considered a campus novel, but it is also a coming of age story. Like Happiness is also told in a really interesting way. We are introduced to our main character when she is a full-blown adult and she has figured out her life. She is very happy, she is in a relationship, she is certain and knows who she is. And so this story is really told as a series of letters that she writes to an abuser that she had when she was younger, and this is her ruminating and realizing that there was an abuse of power in that relationship. This story is character driven and it is reflective. We follow our main character as she explores the subtle and toxic relationship that she had as a young Latina who enters into this undefined relationship with a prestigious Latino author. Moura tackles the harm and abuse that can happen within our own community, and she really grounds into the narrative the idea of learning and creating ourselves rather than depending on a relationship or basing our worth on the relationships that we're in. It's one of those stories stories that really grows on you the more you sit with it. My last and final recommendation for this video is Family Meal by Bryan Washington. This is another book that I read this year that is going to be in my top 10. Now, I will be frank from the beginning, I'm not entirely sure if Bryan Washington is Latinx. I did try to do some research, but I couldn't find conclusive evidence, although it just feels weird trying to investigate into an author's identity. However, I'm including this book because his works often have Black, Latino, gay men, which I think is a perspective that we don't hear a lot through books, and I wanted to make sure that I included a variety of different perspectives in this particular recommendation video. I wish that I could convey how much I loved this book in words. I feel like words always escape me when I talk about this particular book. We are following our central main character, Cam, as his life is spinning out of control after losing his partner Kai. Cam starts to do drugs and go out on promiscuous dates, having sex all of the time. He's also struggling with an eating disorder. And so this is really a story about what happens when you lose your center, when you lose that one person who your life revolved around, your life partner, and the ways in which you ground yourself in community again. Cam moves back home where he reconnects with his old childhood friend and first love, TJ, and we get to see the dynamics play out between them. I also really enjoyed that near the end of the book we do have a perspective through Cam's ghost, who recounts some of the tender moments that he had with Cam. It's just a beautifully told story that is very human and very messy, and I loved every second of it. Those are my recommendations for Latinx Hispanic Heritage Month. Let me know down below if you have any books you recommend or if you want to see any more recommendations. I'll see you soon. Bye.